Welcome back. I'm joined by former Canadian Minister of Agriculture, Gerry Ritz, and we're discussing the recently introduced plan to reduce fertilizer-related emissions here in Canada. And of course, farmers and even consumers are up in arms about this. So, former Minister Ritz, Gerry, let's talk about Canadian farming practices. Of course, when we hear about the need to reduce fertilizer-related nitrogen, that's suggesting there is a problem. So I guess my question to you, is there an environmental problem with the way Canadian farmers farm?
Personally, I don't think so. Whether it's grains or livestock, Canadian producers have stepped up and they are environmental stewards of their land. I mean, no farmer wants to see his land despoiled by farming practices that do that. We used to do that. There were some that mined the soil. We had, 50% summer fallow. That's now gone. Everything's continuous cropping. There's crop cycles that now are 3 to 5 years long that put nutrients back in the soil. The next crop then takes advantage of those nutrients without having to put more on. Nitrogen is put back into the soil by any of the pulse crops, peas, beans, lentils, that type of thing, chickpeas. And then the next crop you'll grow on it will be wheat or durum because you want the higher protein that's driven from that nitrogen concentration. It's not so good for malt barley because you don't want a high protein content there. But farmers are making those decisions based on what's best for their bottom line. And they, as I said earlier, they don't buy extra fertilizer just to broadcast it on, hoping for more results. Everything is tested. And it's the right amount at the right place at the right time, and all these different rules that they've self-imposed that make them that efficient and that effective. The quality and consistency of supply of Canadian product is well known around the world. It made it very easy to sign up trade deals with a lot of other countries. Of course, the devil's in the legal details in those, but at the end of the day, Canadian product is still in huge demand, and we're having problems getting it to them with issues like that. That's the genesis of the concern in the U.S. A lot of what we produce goes down there for further processing. We buy some of it back, some of it hits the world stage. But if that starts to be questioned, that affects their job capabilities in the U.S.
Okay, well, we'll talk about actually how that would impact our U.S.-Canadian relations in a moment. But in terms of how Canada is seen, because, here we have the Prime Minister suggesting this is a problem, and you've done a very good job of eloquently explaining, well, it probably isn't a problem. But how are our farming practices seen globally? Our products are excellent, but is Canada known as a big polluter in the way we manage our farmland?
No, we're not. One of the great opportunities that we had when I was minister was what was called a new crop tour, and industry and government officials and so on, the grading agencies like Crop Commission and so on, they traveled the world after the crop was off, telling them what we had, how good it was, what the specs would be on it if they were looking to buy. And the heroes, the front bench of all of that were the farmers themselves talking about the way they farm, using pictures and videos and so on, showing how we cover the land, why we do it this way and so on. And that was always the big draw for these buyers internationally. So no, Canadian farmers are well thought of globally in the way that they produce this product.
Okay, and again, we touched upon the U.S. Is the U.S. introducing a similar policy?
No. No one is.
What other G7 nation is? Do you know of any G7 nation that is doing this?
No, I don't. A lot of them, in Japan, a rural vote counts for 2 against an urban vote, so they don't lose their agricultural sector. You've got programs like that do disproportionately change things. But at the end of the day, they're all there to enhance as much product as they can to feed their people. China stockpiles unbelievable amounts of product so that they'll never have a hunger again. But they're starting to realize that they've got to start dealing with other countries, and they do. They buy a lot of product from Canada at times. We have to be cautious how we trigger that trade corridor, but at the end of the day, they're a willing buyer and they pay a premium. We've got countries like South Korea, Japan, and others that want that traceability right from the field to the fork, and we can offer that. We use blockchain capacities and so on, and able to further that end. It gives a premium product back to the farm. But there should also, on that same supply chain, be a reverse trigger that takes the carbon credits back to the farmers that are storing that carbon. And right now, we're getting absolutely no use for it and no verification that we're doing that great role.
So are farmers paying carbon tax on their crops, for example?
Huge. They get a little bit of money back on fuel, but there's every other layer of delivery. It's like everybody saying there's no tax on groceries. Wrong. Every step along the way has a carbon tax applied. Anything that handles or processes or transports or stores has a carbon tax on it. that all gets added onto your grocery bill.
My goodness. And so I understand then when you're saying that, if they're actually capturing and retaining the carbon in the soil, then there should be a credit for that. I could understand why the farmers would argue for that. We've got to cut to commercial break. And when we get back, we're going to talk about if this is going to put us at a competitive disadvantage globally, and more so what this means for you, the consumer. Will you see an increase in food prices yet again? Stick around.